The following program contains mature language and potential spoilers. Listeners be advised.
The entire comic book industry, besides Marvel and DC, is undervalued by the general public. As comic aficionados, we'd like to have a podcast out there that covers the entire rest of the industry, besides the so-called big two, besides just superheroes, though we'll cover them as well. And for that purpose, we will be your underguides. Mr. Joe Fixit.
Adios, mío.
The Irredeemable Shag.
You get so busy producing the shit, you don't have time to listen to much.
The Mac.
You want to sit over here next to me? We can do a little duet.
And myself, Frank.
Digging on the comics. Guess I still dig them when I'm 6x6. Digging my kicks. Digging on the comics. I like to save them. And I like to trade them. I read them. I need them. I'm living every page.
Is there any new 52 character that is a quote-unquote legacy, but is a complete, fresh new character?
I don't recall them ever doing that. I really think that everybody was just a remodel of an old character. I can't remember them trying to do that. That would have been, I know, for some bizarro reason that you won't be able to explain to me, you like Tangent. You know, you like the Tangent
Yes,
universe.
I do.
And
I like what-if stories, though.
There was some stuff in there that kind of worked. People seem to really like the Tangent Joker, for instance. The design and the personality and her whole...
Harlequin before there was a Harlequin.
Exactly. While that universe didn't catch on, and while I didn't see the appeal in it, I like that they at least were trying to do what Julie Schwartz did. I remember that was like their selling point, wasn't it? Is they were trying to do like Julie did in the 50s in the modern era. They're just taking the names and building a whole new concept around that.
I don't remember them saying that, but yeah, you're right, they were.
That's what you need to do sometimes. And most of the time they can't pull it off because back in the day you've got Stan and Jack and Gil Kane and John Broome and all these guys that are just like at the peak of their powers in their time period. And you would need those guys to do the work. And those guys aren't doing the work for companies like DC and Marvel because they know they're not going to own it. They know that if it takes off, they're just going to be an interchangeable piece in the machine. So go do that at Image. And that's why I'm reading Image books, because as much as I would like to see a true New 52, where they're taking elements of these failed concepts and giving us an entirely new idea or largely new idea, they're not doing that. We're not getting those name brand talents. We're not getting people who are on fire. We're getting guys who can't hack it on their own. The guys who can hack it on their own are creating innovative material. They're just doing it at other companies, and I'd rather buy their books, and that's what I'm ordering out of previews. We're going to do that independent comics podcast, and it's going to be focusing on trade paperbacks. I'm waiting because I really want to have the first one be Minimum Wage. I don't know if you ever read that series from the 90s.
No.
Bob Fingerman. It's all about not life in the 90s, and I read the original graphic novel, and it just blew my mind how of the 90s it was. Not in that way of like that 70s show or something where it's like, hey, look how cool the 90s were, but in the sense that here's a guy who's writing and drawing a book, who's based in a major city, whose book is based in a major city, who's reflecting his current times, which happened to be the 90s, and it was just so 90s. It just like caused an explosion in my brain of all these memories of that time period. It's like, holy crap, yeah, all the Riot Girl stuff and all, and I just loved it. And
so just so for clarification, it was actually written back then, or is it current?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the thing
what's it called again?
It's called Minimum Wage, but it was recently revived at Image. Image did a collection of the entire original Fantagraphic series in a volume called Maximum Minimum Wage, where it's almost in tabloid dimensions. It's a really big hardcover book. It's not thick because it only collects, I think, about 10 or 12 issues, but it's just unwieldy in terms of its format. It's just a big volume, and it's even got a ribbon in it. And so they printed that, and now Bob Fingerman's continuing the series because apparently the reprints did so well that he was emboldened to start the series anew in the present day. So you do have a modern series by the same creator by the same name. So they're, and I haven't read that. I don't know how good that is, but I loved that book back in the 90s. I hadn't read that stuff since I read it the first time back in the day, and rereading it, it was like, oh my God, this is so great. So I want that to be our first episode, but we've already done ones where we covered like Bedlam, which if you're a fan of Batman the Joker, it's a Joker series, ongoing series essentially at Image by, what is his name? Nick Spencer.
Okay, right.
And then we read Deathmatch, which is essentially Secret Wars with blood and guts.
I've heard of that one.
But there are a lot of good books. That's why I wanted to throw out that shout out to Empowered, because that's a great book for if you want to enjoy an entire universe of great mad ideas.
Now, I know this one's not minor press. I mean, it's gotten a lot of news, and Kirkman's over popularized. But have you tried Invincible?
I've tried really hard to get Invincible. It's everything. It's sort of like what you said about what was the cake analogy we were making earlier?
Oh, all the ingredients are there, but it didn't get baked right.
Yeah, exactly. I tried really hard to get into anything Kirkman has ever done besides Walking Dead, and it just doesn't work. I read Brit. I read Invincible. I read Astonishing Wolfman. I tried all that stuff, and none of it really works. Although I will say Outcast, I read the first issue of that, and that was pretty damn good.
Well, I would say the two things, because even Walking Dead as a comic didn't really do much for me. But the two things, I love the series, but the comic didn't. Mm-hmm. The things that Kirkman has done that really, I enjoyed Marvel Zombies, the first trade. I thought that was very good.
And Ant-Man.
What's that?
Ant-Man.
And Irredeemable Ant-Man, I fucking love because it's so outrageous.
I've got both those volumes. They only did the 2 volumes, if I remember correctly, and it was a great book. And Mr. Fixit's a big fan of that as well.
So you have read or you have not?
Oh,
read?
yeah, I've read it.
Okay.
No, that was the only thing he did at Marvel that I really enjoyed. I didn't even like Marvel Zombies, but Ant-Man was great.
When he tries to have sex with his best friend's girlfriend on his best friend's grave, that is the best. That is like unbelievable. So, and in fact, that's where Irredeemable came from.
We're going to have to. Yeah, I remember you told me that story in the past. I remember that because I always associate you with the Ant-Man because of that.
Now Invincible. A buddy of mine let me read it, and I had a hard time with it because I didn't feel like it was watered down. It just I could read an entire trade, which is 4 or 6 issues, whatever, in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can't see spending $14.95 on something I can read in 15 minutes. So what I've done is I've been checking them out from the library, and for free, Invincible is an awesome comic.
That might have been my problem. I was buying those first few trades and not appreciating that. Mr. Fixit's a big fan of library borrowing, so
I would get the big what they call I think it's called Ultimate Collections or something, where it's I don't know 20 issues or something in one volume, or maybe it's 3 trades in one volume, whatever. But and I could burn through them in an hour and a half. But damn, it was enjoyable. It really was. So I mean, I'm a big fan of Invincible. I just won't pay for it because it's not worth the amount of money you'd have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another problem with Invincible for me too is that he is a Peter Parker, and I hate Peter Parkers.
Really?
Yeah, that's.
Why do you like Firestorm? I mean, why do you like Blue Devil?
He's not a Peter Parker, man. See that, and again, that's
define Peter Parker.
Peter Parker is that everyman type character where he's very much that suburban white guy, and the this prototypical teenage young adult guy who he's dating the girls, and he's just like the stereotypical white guy aged 16 to 21.
Okay, if you bring Blue Devil to a younger age, he's Peter Parker.
I don't know. I just don't see it.
He's a suburban white kid. Nothing goes right for him. It's all about his romantic relationship with Sharon. It's just the age is different. That's all.
Well, and sometimes that does make a difference, though, because he's already a professional. He's adjusting well to a situation. He's not whining about it all the time like a lot of those type of characters would do.
Okay. There's not a lot of angst. I'll give you that. And
because the book is designed to be like lighthearted and fun, it's not all angsty. That's a major contributing factor there. He's an adult. Adults don't do angst. Angst is the purview of teenagers. And Invincible is all about that teen angst and dating issues and being accepted in the hero community. And I just don't like that kind of books. I like confident adult characters. So I think that's been one of my big problems. Now, maybe Invincible after issue, 100 or so, now that he's gone through all these travails and he's become more of a hardened veteran type character. It's just like a Nova. Nova was another Peter Parker. Hated the Nova issues I read recently for ahead of the Annihilation. And then in Annihilation, he takes a major step forward in being a mature hero, and that apparently continues into his ongoing series. So I go from really hating Nova to thinking, hey, this is a pretty all right guy. He's a pretty cool cosmic character now.
You must hate Firestorm then.
I have my issues with Firestorm. I've talked to you in the past where I have trouble reading the early stuff. I like Jason Rush, and I like the stuff after, like the blank slate period. I like all that stuff when you were dealing with East-West, issue, like when all the comedies were showing up and such. I like that material, but I really have trouble connecting to the stuff that you love the most, unfortunately. That's why, I try to read it, but it's just, he's not, and it's just me. I know it's me. I'm not trying to blame the character. I'm perfectly happy listening to a podcast about the guy, but he just doesn't hook me until the blank slate era.
That's fine. I love every era. I don't like the early Jason Russ issues.
I didn't either. Because I really had issues with, I just don't think that the character was handled very well. I didn't like that in the very first issue of a book that's got a black protagonist, he's going to be involved in a drug deal that goes bad. It just really set wrong with me. And I didn't start liking that book until Ronnie showed up. And the way he was playing off the character, it just like the book really started to hit its stride, and then Jolly leaves just as the book is getting good, and then the Stuart Moore stuff wasn't as good.
Well, apparently Jolly wanted the book to be more like his final issues the whole time, and DC editorial wouldn't let him. They kept saying, no, you can't use any Firestorm foes. You have to, no one from the classic stuff. It's all got to be original. And and it's got to be darker, it's got to be edgier. And so he wrote and then finally when he's like, all right, I'm either he decided to leave or they decided he was going to leave, so he got to do what he wanted at the end,
and that was the good stuff.
Which is the best stuff he did.
And you're speaking as a guy who's a fan of the classic Firestorm. I'm speaking as a guy who wasn't very much into Firestorm, who was trying to read the book in part because of black protagonist. I wanted to support a book with a black protagonist because it was one of the only ones coming out at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have this great strong. I mean, I knew the Firestorm villains, but they wouldn't have swayed me if the stories weren't good. Those stories were good. They were entertaining. They were fun. I could enjoy Ronnie a lot better the way he was playing off of Jason than I could when he was on his own. So the book got good for a person who's coming at it objectively, and apparently the book got good for somebody who was a dyed-in-the-wool fan as well. So they kind of blew it there.
Now, I like the Stuart Moore stuff, too. Not at first, but once they got on the other side of Infinite Crisis and Jason was paired up with Professor Stein, I really enjoyed those quite a bit.
That was probably my problem, too, is I gave up on the book right after Infinite Crisis because they did all those stupid tie-ins, and I kept waiting for the book to get started, and I think I read that first 3-issue arc after Infinite Crisis where they were bringing in Stein. But at that point, they'd already exhausted so much of my interest and so many of my dollars because I think the book was $253 at that time.
Probably.
And I wasn't getting a good discount then, so I finally did drop it.
Yep, understandable.
I heard that the Dwayne McDuffie stuff was good too, right?
Well, he only wrote 3 issues, and he was told he was closing out the book. Mm-hmm. And really, it was, if anything, I'm not a fan of it simply because I knew what it was, which was it was a teaser for Countdown. Mm-hmm. And so I had a hard time with it. Now, if I were to reread it, which I haven't done since then, I might enjoy it more. But I hate Countdown, and I hate everything about Countdown. And so I have a hard time with it. And I hate everything about Infinite Crisis. I'm
with Michael Bailey,
I hate
where
that fucking
he uses that as a jumping off point, and he was wise. I wished I had done that.
I missed most of what you said.
With Michael Bailey, he does his From Crisis to Crisis.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, this is my period, and all the stuff after this, I'm going to pick and choose what I please. He was smart in that. That was definitely a great jumping off point for the DC Universe. I wished I'd followed his lead. Hell, I don't think I knew who he was back then, but he had the right idea.
I'm definitely a crisis tweener. I tried to coin a phrase, it never took off. Although Newsarama got behind it at one point. I tried to coin a term which was crisis tweener, which means I'm a fan of the DC Universe from Crisis on Infinite Earths to Infinite Crisis. That's my DCU.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that.
So, Crisis tweener.
Honestly, the year 2000 was probably a good jump off point. There really wasn't much that came after that point that I gave a crap about. I can't think of anything I was really passionate about. I read Rebels for 3 years, waiting for it to get good, and that was going to be my last DC book, and then they managed to hook me again. But I kept buying stuff that I wasn't enjoying. It was a shame.
Whenever I think of the late 90s, early 2000s, and I try and think of a good book, what always comes to mind is a Marvel book, which is Thunderbolts. Fuzik's Thunderbolts.
Mm-hmm. I didn't
love that
read
book.
It, but one of the great things about having a comic shop, and I'm sure you remember this, is you unpack these books, you put them up on the shelves, everybody comes, they buy the books, they go home, and then the books are still sitting there. It's like, well, I got nothing to do. Let me read a few of these books. Oh, I'm doing strip cover returns. They're going to go to the trash anyway. Well, hell, why don't I take some of these strip covers with me and read them in the bathtub? And so I wasn't following a lot of those books, especially something like Thunderbolts, but I found that I enjoyed Thunderbolts more often than not when I did read it. And just thumbing through the books, a lot of times it was just a matter of I would flip through the books because it's slow, nobody's there right now, let me do something. And it just looked like an appealing series. It looked like they were doing interesting things pretty consistently.
Yeah, it was always fun. Really enjoyed it. It got a little weird for a while when they were publishing. It was either 2 a month or whatever, and one issue took place on Counter Earth, like Franklin Richards' Heroes Reborn world, and then one issue would be on Counter Earth, one issue would be on regular Earth, and that was a little funky, but
it got
still
gimmicky then too, because when they brought in that guy that was created in a 70s fanzine, and they brought him into that as well, and they just started getting all kinds of wonky stuff in the mix.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember that.
Okay. Well, if you get the chance, I read the Fight Club issues at the end of the series when after 75 they decided to turn into this weird superhuman Fight Club.
Oh, well, that was Garth Ennis, wasn't it?
No, it was John Arcudi. And
that's an artist. No, is that a writer?
No, that's the writer. Yeah, because John Arcudi wrote one of my favorite runs on Aquaman. He took over the book after.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so he's known for doing weird stuff. He did Major Bummer. He's been mostly writing Mike Mignola's books in recent years, and that was a little 5-issue run, and right before the book got canceled, and it was actually some pretty good stuff. I wouldn't pay good money for it, but it's on Marvel Unlimited for free. It was pretty awesome.
I think I bought that, actually, now you mention it. I'm pretty sure I stayed with that. And then they gave Thunderbolts, I want to say, another try with Busiek, and it was either Bagley or someone like Bagley. Maybe it was Grummett. And then shortly after that, Garth Ennis took back over again. Or not again, but Garth Ennis took over.
I think Warren Ellis did it for a while, didn't he?
That's what I'm trying to say. Warren Ellis. I get them both confused.
I'm trying to
They're
think
like they're the same guy to me.
It was Fabian. They did the Avengers Thunderbolts miniseries with Fabian Nicieza and Barry Kitson, if I remember correctly.
And that should have been good, but it was kind of blah.
Yeah. How was the Zemo miniseries? I bought the trade years ago and I never read it. I love Baron Zemo, and I don't know why. I've just never got around to reading the trade that I own.
I don't remember it standing out. Like, there was they produced a lot of stuff back. They produced the Baron Zemo miniseries. They had a Citizen V miniseries or two.
And I've got that in a poly bag in a box that hasn't been opened in 10, 15 years.
Don't bother. I mean, all of them were fine, but none of them were great, is kind of what it was. I loved Thunderbolt. Like, the first 14 issues or so of Thunderbolts is amazing. The stuff when Hawkeye joins is really good. Again, when the series did end, after the Fight Club one, when it came back with, maybe it wasn't Busiek, I don't know, whatever, but it was more of a return to the classic Thunderbolt look, with, I think, Jolt and Mach 5 or whatever his name was. When those guys came back for a little while, that was really good. And then I can't remember, but like, I definitely did not enjoy the Garth Ennis years. I stayed with it for a while. Now, I keep saying Garth Ennis, Warren Ellis. The Warren Ellis stuff, I tried to enjoy it, but the characters were so unlikable and were so bad and horrible people. I just couldn't enjoy the series. And
it was basically just Suicide Squad at that point as well.
Yes, it was Suicide Squad. It absolutely was Suicide Squad. And I've never been a big fan. I like Venom in the 80s. Beyond that, I'm not a fan of Venom.
It's funny because in comics we throw around the term hack, and it's supposed to have a qualitative element to it. You're either good or you're a hack. But Warren Ellis is very much a hack in its proper term, where he's a guy who will just write the stuff for the money. And if you like Warren Ellis' style of writing, you'll probably like his hack work. But if you care about the characters, it's pretty hard not to notice when he's basically just stealing a concept from somebody else and knocking that stuff out for the paycheck. And they seem to me like that's exactly what Thunderbolts was.
Yeah, could very well be. I mean, it was people loved it though. I mean, people really, really got on board with it.
I think Mr. Fixit was into it.
Here we go. So it ended, and then it was the New Thunderbolts. That's what it was called, the New Thunderbolts. I remember that now. And then went into Civil War, and that's when it became the Warren Ellis book. Yeah. Yeesh. Ugh. Anyway.
I want you to tell me about Scalped.
Scalped. All right. It's a Vertigo book written by Jason Aaron. And you're going to go all fucking technical with the artists and inkers and the guy who, laid out the paper. And
was it the same artist throughout the series?
I don't know. You tell me. You probably know this shit before I do. I read, enjoy. I'm not very good at analytical. The technical part of it. Like the artist. I honestly, that's what surprised me about that last book. I usually can read anything, and the degree of artwork does not bother me too much. As long as it isn't like really bad artwork, I can pretty much read anything as long as the story is engaging, enjoyable, takes you to some new ideas. But Scalped.
Well, Wikipedia says Scalped is a critically acclaimed 60-issue crime western comic book series written by Jason Aaron and illustrated by R.M. Guerra, published monthly by Vertigo Comics. Issue number 1 was published on January 3rd, 2007. The series focuses on the Oglala Lakota inhabitants of the fictional Prairie Rose Indian Reservation in modern-day South Dakota as they grapple with organized crime, rampant poverty, drug addiction and alcoholism, local politics, and the preservation of their cultural identity.
Yeah.
So same creative team for 5 straight years, which is impressive.
Yeah. And the book, like I said, I haven't got to finish reading the collection. I got up to trade 5, but I really do. It's one of those where I am actively seeking out the rest of them that I do want to read. I'm trying to remember the main character's name is something horse. Dead Horse? No, not Crazy Horse. What's the main character's name? He's the sheriff. Well,
hold on a second.
Because Red Crow is the chief.
Okay. Continuing with the Wikipedia entry, the inspiration for Scalped, it was originally begun as a prospective relaunch of Scalp Hunter, an older DC character. As development proceeded, much of the original concept was abandoned in favor of the current plot. Jason Aaron has said the plot of the comic is partly inspired by Leonard Peltier, a Native American activist who was arrested for the murder of 2 FBI agents in a reservation shootout in 1975. From what I recall, that guy's still in jail on trumped-up charges. After 15 years of absence, Dashiell Badhorse returns to the res says, and is probably arrested and taken to Lincoln Red Crow, president of the Oglala Tribal Council and sheriff of the tribal police. Red Crow, bemoaning the prevalence of half-breed Indians and desiring more enforcers to counteract the nativists protesting his new Crazy Horse Casino, hires Bad Horse into the tribal police force. After raiding a number of meth labs to clean up the reservation's public image before the opening of the casino, it would appear Bad Horse has cemented his reputation as a ruthless and effective tribal officer. In reality, Bad Horse is an undercover FBI agent, overseen by SAC agent Bayless Earl Nitz, and ordered to find evidence linking Red Crow to the murder of 2 FBI agents 30 years ago, during Red Crow's time as a Native American rights activist, coincidentally co-run by Dashiell's estranged mother, Gina Bad Horse.
Yes. And, I mean, what do you want to know? I mean, it's
it's 5 volumes, you said.
No. It's like 10 volumes.
Okay, it's 10 volumes.
I've read 5.
You didn't finish the series yet?
No.
So you're halfway through the series, though. How do you feel about it?
Like I said, I'm actively trying to get the rest of them to finish them. Like I told you, I usually like different genres. I'll read different things to kind of cleanse the palate, go somewhere different. I was never big into crime books. I would read, if a particular writer was writing it, I would probably pick it up. Garth Ennis, he likes doing a lot of crime stuff.
Brubaker.
Alan Moore does some stuff. I would pick it up and read it. Warren Ellis, I would pick them up and read it, but I wouldn't actively like, oh, it's a crime book.
You're reading it for the writer, not for the genre they're writing.
You're the one that taught me follow the writer, don't so much follow the character, which I've adopted through time. So when I started reading Scalped, Jason Aaron, I just read his Thor stuff. I was really impressed with his Thor stuff and some other X-Men stuff he wrote. So I was like, let me give it a try. Man, I'm fiending to finish the series. It's one of those series that it's so dark and it's for Bad Horse. It's almost like every time he can redeem himself, he just fucking finds another way to lower his level. I mean, I don't want to give away. This is one of those books where I don't want to give away spoilers because it's an enjoyable read. If you want something that's very based on characters and really looks at the dark side of a character, looks at that bad decision you're gonna make and you kind of double think about like that bad decision you're about to make and you're really really thinking about it, he just fucking full goes for it. It doesn't slow him. And yet he's supposed to be law enforcement. He's there to really bring in people who are, I guess, worse than him. But as the series goes on, it's just his interacting with his mother, his family, his heritage. All these pieces are conflicting with him. And then, he goes back and he runs into an old lover who just happens to be Red Crow's daughter. And then he builds this love affair with her. But she's just on a whole other fucked up train that he's just riding along with. And so he's trying to do his job. At the same time, the FBI agents who are his handlers are, if not worse than the villains. Like, everyone in here is bad. There's no one with redeemable qualities. And then when you do run into a character that you're kind of feeling for, and then something bad or something just bad happens, you're just like, wow, there's like, this world is so bleak and so dark that you expect everyone to die at the end. It's one of those it's so gloomy. And it's weird to say, I can't wait to finish reading this, but it's one of those books I want to reach the end.
Well, it's sort of like Breaking Bad. By the halfway point of that series, this isn't going to end well.
Breaking Bad, though, Walter went from I feel for him to he's a villain to all of a sudden you start rooting for the bad guy. He's bad and you're kind of rooting. This one, Bad Horse, I never found myself as going, come on, Bad Horse. Every time I was like, well, he can't get any worse, he would get worse. I believe Gina, the daughter, every time you thought that, well, they couldn't get any worse, she would get, like, every character. It's, and it's cool because they bring up these characters, like I believe there's one called Injun, and like Indian. Yeah. He's a white character who believes he's Native American, and he wants to be Native American so bad that he becomes so bad that they fear him and have to accept him because in his mind he's one of them. Because it's great, man. I really enjoy it. It's nice to read something like this that's outside my usual wheelhouse and get into it and read it. And it's not superhero, it's not supernatural fucked upness. It's a really gritty crime story, which I haven't read in a while. So, I recommend it. I've enjoyed it. I tried to give you the first one. You were kind of like, nah.
Well, the problem is DC has a program that intermittently they do this where they put out a bunch of dollar books. And I recall buying, I believe that Scalped was one of those dollar books. I read it, the first issue, and I didn't like the art. I wasn't crazy about the story. I could see that bleakness you were talking about, that this was a book about fucked up people in a fucked up place doing fucked up shit. And the absence of anybody anybody that I felt inclined to root for, and just I didn't care for the artwork.
That's why I tell you, we just read something where I thought the artwork was horrible.
Yeah.
Sometimes the artwork works for the story. This one needs to be dark and gritty. I just like it because every book you'll see a different character, and they'll actually follow the character for a little bit, and they show how they're all intertwined. And of course, they're all on the res, what they call it, the res. And it's this bleak world where like the poor are poorer than poor, but there's still people there that are connected to their heritage and their beliefs, and the spirit walkers and this and that. And Red Crow, he I think deep down believes he's doing what's right, just with might type thing, where he has to control. And I mean, it's just a really, I don't know. And like I said, I usually don't. I like fucked up books, but this book's so dark at points where I was kind of like, like I don't know if I want to keep going with it. And then I would get another. You get to the last issue, and they do a great cliffhanger where you're like, well, fucking, I gotta read the next one. And I like I said, I got up to 5. I had a chance to possess the last 5, and I didn't take that chance. And so, because there's so much crap you got us reading, I haven't had time to really actively search them out. But the minute I could get my hands on them, that's just something I want to finish reading. But it's really good. I've enjoyed it so far, and I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds of people or thousands of people that have enjoyed it as well. Maybe for the same reason, probably for different reasons. Because Bad Horse is really a cool character. He's actually a DC character.
Well, it's Vertigo.
Okay, Vertigo, but he's an older character.
Well, no, what I'm saying is they had a character called Scalp Hunter back in the 70s who was a white man who'd been raised among the natives and gone native.
Indian?
Yeah. And he became like a Western hero for their books. And so the inspiration was Aaron trying to do an update on Scalp Hunter, but it not unlike what happened with Alan Moore's Watchmen, the more he got into the project, the more he took ownership of it, the more creations of his own that were whole cloth that he came up with. In this case, he didn't have an editor step in and say, you ought to just make this your own. He just, I think, decided, I'll just going to keep this one.
Yeah.
I'm far enough away from the original material that I was trying to work towards. I've gone so far away from that I'm just going to keep it. And of course, the tone of the book was so dark that it was going to have to be at Vertigo anyway, so it might as well be. I believe that that's a creator-owned book, but that was probably put out after DC got pressure from Warner Brothers to not offer the kind of generous participation deals that they had done previously, like with Preacher. Preacher has been optioned as an AMC series. They're working on the pilot. They're putting that together. AMC is looking at that series as being hopefully another Walking Dead. Yeah, because they've lost Breaking Bad. They've lost. They're losing Mad Men pretty soon. I don't know how well Better Call Saul has been doing in the ratings. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I've got a bunch of them on the DVR.
Well, I know a lot of on social media, which I'm not on very much, but I know a lot of people have issues with the last episode of Walking Dead and some spoiler stuff that happened there. And there's like,
I can tell you. And I always, in the comics, Aaron's already established as gay.
I always laugh because I'll meet, like, I have friends at work and they don't read comics, and they're like, Walking Dead this, and I'm like, well, I've been reading the trades. I'm like trade 25 already. So what y'all are watching, they were like all shocked. I'm like, oh, he's been around for a while. Like,
the book's been surprisingly faithful. The show's been surprisingly faithful to the book.
I mean, it's one of those things where, kind of what we were talking about earlier, like with Game of Thrones, where when your written material stops because the writer isn't producing anymore, yet your show is going full speed, all of a sudden you have to start making up shit. Walking Dead's lucky where they have 25 trades to take from, but they do seem to be taking huge leaps, because I heard they're already coming up to the Negan stuff.
No, they're not that far along yet. They're roughly equivalent to the late 60s on Walking Dead.
Because I don't want them to reach Negan yet. That was
No, they still get some time for that. My problem, and I don't want to go into this too deep, because at some point I think we're going to cover Walking Dead, but my problem with the show is they finally reached the point where I think the comics turn sour. Because once they get to, they've been in the same town for fucking 5 years now or whatever. I don't know the name of the town. I can't tell you the name of the town. There's a bunch of characters that were introduced in the town that they've gotten to on the show now. I don't know any of those characters' names because I don't give a fuck about any of those characters. The reason why I'm saying Aaron, I could kind of remember him since he was the first gay character in the comics, and because he was very well depicted on the show, and his relationship with his lover was far superiorly demonstrated in one episode of Walking Dead as opposed to the years that he's been in the Walking Dead comic books. One problem I have is, when Tony Moore left the book and Charlie Adler took over, I really wasn't sure I was going to be able to stick with that series because I hated Charlie Adler before that point. And but I realized he was actually a much better fit for the book. He worked well with the characters. He got to be the main artist for a lot of the introductions of characters I really liked, like Michonne and Tyrese. Yeah. So his versions were the definitive versions. But once they reached 70 and they introduced all these new characters, so many of them looked the same to me. They all looked like the same guy. He's having to draw so many characters that he started to do like default face types where they just didn't have enough diversity. And Kirkman was writing so many characters that he didn't develop those characters well enough to where when they would die or get bit or whatever that I gave a fuck. So what's good is the show has reached a point where they can really take over and develop those characters better than Kirkman ever could, which is something they've demonstrated with the Aaron character. And I hope that they continue that, because Kirkman, that's where I feel he jumped the shark on the series, where he lost his ability to imbue his characters with enough life for me to give a fuck what happened to them. And that's why I recently dropped Walking Dead. I'm not buying the trades anymore. I stopped with All Out War, and because I'm just done with it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of all those characters now. Even the characters that are still around from the early days, I don't like them anymore. They've got on my nerves at this point. So the show is at a very precarious point. Either they're going to figure out how to make that town interesting to me and do a better job than Kirkman did with the book, or they're going to follow the book too faithfully and it's going to get shitty just like the comics have gotten shitty.
Oh, you're talking to someone who's only seen 2 seasons of the show, so.
Oh, Walking Dead?
Yeah, I haven't kept up with it.
It gets better, actually, because 2's where they're on Herschel's farm, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, you really...
Everybody's like, Netflix, it's on. And I'm just like, I've read the books. I'm good right now. Like, I don't... When one or the other ends and I can go and just binge watch it or binge read, I'll be fine. Because there's so much... It's so weird that there's so much to read. Like I told you, you were asking me what were you reading earlier, and I'm like, I forget after a while because I'm just reading so many different trades, trying to keep up with all this new material coming out, and then trying to read just, not...
Well, actual books?
Like actual books, yeah. I mean, I sat down because I every few years I read Animal Farm. It's always been one of my favorite books. And I was like, okay, this month, I told myself in March, I'm going to start reading Animal Farm. It'll take me about 2 days, maybe 3, depending on, because I know the book forward and back, but it's just one of those books I've always enjoyed reading. And it's like, but I have so much, like you gave me and Fryhole gave me, and I just have stacks and stacks of books, and I look at them and I'm just like, I'm starting to feel like I'm in school again, like, oh, I got homework tonight.
Right. I do feel that way sometimes with the books, especially because I'm trying to read stuff for the podcasts, and when I had my blog, I was reading stuff to review there, and stuff starts to pile up, stuff that I bought with the intention of reading and reviewing, and it's still sitting there unread, and you start to feel like a jerk after a while.
Yeah, but I mean, I recommend Scalped. Honestly, it's not for you. I don't think you'd like it.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually a good segue, because with Image, I love, as was pretty clear from the first episode under Guides, I fucking love Image Comics. I love their model. I'm so glad that the company matured. I'm so glad that the company matured into featuring the mature material that I wanted them to have in the first place, instead of doing this shitty superhero stuff that they started out with. And what I've been doing is, since Image has been promoting a lot of their trades, their initial trades of various series at the $9.99 price point, I buy almost everything they put out not Image. I buy almost every trade they put out in that $10 format. That first trade, it's a $10 sampler. I get a good discount, so usually I don't pay more than $5 or $6 for that trade. So it's like, why the fuck wouldn't I buy a trade paperback collecting 5 or 6 issues for $5 or $6? It's like $1 an issue.
Hey, dude, that's how I got into Glory.
Yeah,
and I really enjoyed that series. I thought it was a good series.
Well, it's funny that you say Glory, because it only lasted like 2 trades.
But see, that's to me sometimes
2 or 3 trades.
No, 2 trades. It's 2 trades.
Is it just 2? Okay.
Yeah, but see, sometimes that's what a series should last. You don't need to drag it. It doesn't need to be an X-Men. It doesn't need to be a fucking JLA book where you're shooting for issue 153. Sometimes a good 20, 30. I mean, you just talked about how Walking Dead, the series, the trades, you've burned out because they're already at 25. And I agree with you. There's sometimes where it kind of yammers on. It's just kind of like, well, okay, zombies, yes. Ooh, oh, look, they run into some more fucking
Well, this is my problem. It's not about zombies anymore. It's a fucking Western. It's not a particularly good Western series, but and that's really one of the origin points for zombies. If you go back, Westerns, it was always about all the white people would be in the fort and they're being attacked by the savages from without, and you're trying to defend the fortress against these invaders. I think that's why zombies have been embraced in modern times, because it's tapping into those southern roots of in the Westerns, that mentality of we're in the fort and we're trying to keep the others out of the fort. At a time when Barack Obama is our president, I could see where that would resonate resonate with certain kinds of people.
Some deep shit into
Yeah.
this.
So, but the problem is at this point, Kirkman's doing a soap opera, pseudo-western that doesn't really have the engines anymore very much.
Do you think
and the conflicts between the humans aren't engaging to me. I just don't fucking care
do you
anymore.
think it would have worked better if it was a shorter series instead of just keep going?
I'm quite certain that if it had reached an endpoint or if it appeared to be anywhere near reaching an endpoint, I'd be more interested in it. But as this ongoing, endless soap opera that feels padded as fuck,
See, this is
it's definitely hurt by that.
This is
but it's
where-
still fucking selling. People are still loving
But
it.
see, oh,
Let the
of
man make
course.
his money, you know?
Dude, this is where you have your soap operas and your novellas. A novella is a very short soap opera. They retell the story over and over, but it's short, it's compact, it's fast, all killer, all thriller. Was it all killer?
All killer, no filler.
No filler type storytelling. Where this is more like that to me feels like an American General Hospital where it just
Yeah,
keeps going.
30 years and you never get a real resolution to any fucking thing.
There's never, no conclusion. That's what I liked about Glory. I read the first issue. I read the last issue. It told a good story. It had some cool artwork. It had some fucked up parts. I enjoyed it, and I put it on my shelf. Martial Law, great short stories. You read it, you move it on.
Yeah.
And
Martial Law did run a little longer than it should have. I know as much as we would like them to have done more stuff.
No.
The last several martial law
But they're all
specials
short
and one shots. Yeah, they're short, which is nice, but that doesn't mean they're good.
The Mask and the Hellraiser.
Yeah, well, no, I read the book. You know that there's a novel, right?
I own it.
Whereas you got the two stories that are prose stories. They're pure text. They did because they had spot illustrations by Kevin O'Neill throughout. But it's an actual novel. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it at Half a Bookstore.
Yeah, that wasn't good either.
Really? I never.
No, I read it. It wasn't good.
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. If we ever get our martial law on and reach that point, I'll reread it. But it wasn't.
But see, but stuff like that, like Grendel, like there's books like there that I think they work in increments.
Yeah.
Increments.
Well, Grendel was a brilliant series, and I'm looking forward to reading that. In that you got like an epic story
that goes generations,
and then they would jump and they would tell, but they had a concept, and it wasn't about a specific character. It was about this concept and how it impacts, and they also had a great ability to escalate the scale from a very small scale, one hero, one anti-hero, one villain, one girl, and then within a few generations, a few iterations of the Grendel storytelling, you had a future global civilization, totalitarian.
Grendel Prime, baby.
Yeah. So then that's why Matt Wagner's revered for his ability to do that. Robert Kirkman isn't Matt Wagner. The fact is, as much as I like some Robert Kirkman books, he's been more missed than hit with me.
Well, see, that's the fun thing with me. I enjoy his Invincible stuff better.
Yeah.
Because I think he's not stuck on a planet. He's not stuck in a genre. So he can do your superhero stuff and go out and do some different things with it. Now, granted, it's retelling of other stories from a JLA universe or a X-Men story arc, but he just puts his spin on it, his stink on it. Where the Walking Dead, it's trapped in a sandbox, and you can't get out of that sandbox. He can't have fucking vampires all of a sudden appear, because then that's stupid. You can't have werewolves all of a sudden appear. You can't have UFOs all of a sudden. Like, there's a lot of things you can't add. So then you
and I understand that that's him being true to the George Romero concept, but at the same time, I find it somewhat cowardly because he can't go outside of that genre. There's nothing stopping him from doing something like that.
No, it's a paycheck.
Yeah, that's exactly it, except for the money.
Yeah, the minute you do something weird with it, that's it. You're gonna lose all
a good chunk of your audience because they only want the exact prescribed dosage of zombiness.
Yeah,
yes.
and I actually talked to Fryhole about this. We were sitting there joking, and I noticed he usually gives me some comics and trades and stuff. And I'm like, hey, there's no zombie stuff, and he goes, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm tired of zombies too. He's like, thank God someone else will say it, because even he feels like it's weird. We were into zombies a while back. I'm to the point now where I'm actually tired of zombies. I'm tired of zombie movies.
Yeah. I don't agree. I still love zombies. I think that
I enjoy them, but I think it's just saturated right now.
My thing is, as long the problem is it got popular, and so there's just so much
saturation.
Shit. And they used to be that the zombie genre was small enough that I could watch everything, and good or bad, it still added to the zombie mythos. No. It was still part of that whole. But now there's so much shit, and so much of it is regurgitated, where they're bringing nothing new to the formula. They're not offering anything different in their take, that I don't see the point in their existing. And the quality has been spread thin, because it used to be if you were going to do a zombie movie, it's because you fucking dug on Romero and Fulci Fulci and Raimi and Dan O'Bannon and got you were going to the good stuff and you were doing your version of the good shit.
But they were
and now everybody's decided that they're going to do either Romero zombies or they're doing shit like Fast Zombies. And they're not doing anything new with it. They're just telling a new story with that same concept. You're not getting different flavors of zombie. Fulci did not do Romero zombies. Dan O'Bannon did not do Fulci zombies. They all did their own thing with it because the zombie lore wasn't codified. It wasn't like silver bullets, garlic, stakes through the heart.
Shot to the head.
Yeah. Everything's fucking shot to the head now. And it's like, well, did you guys never hear of the Dan O'Bannon zombies? That would be fucking cool. That would be an interesting book. How the fuck do you deal with zombies that don't fucking die no matter what you do? And the bigger the reaction to the zombies, like fucking nuking them or burning them, just makes more zombies because the living breathe in the ashes and they become fucking zombies too. There's a story in that where it's like Tex Avery. The scale just keeps getting bigger and bigger and your response to it gets bigger and bigger and you have to reach to further and further extremes to continue to tell that story. But no, everybody's just doing fucking Romero zombies. Everybody's doing shot to the head. And you know what I'm really sick of on Walking Dead especially? Skulls are not soft. You can't just run around and stab everybody in the eye hole. Not everybody is going to be such a good shot that they can hit people in the fucking head every fucking time they shoot. The video game dynamics of these stories. I like it as much as frustrating as it is to watch a movie like Dawn of the Dead and see Flyboy just fucking up and not being able to hit a zombie with a hammer from a foot away. Yeah. But most people, or at least a sizable percentage, are not that well.
They don't have the motor skills.
They don't have that agility. They don't have that kind of eyesight. Most people are going to get fucking swarmed and die. And I realize that in the zombie apocalypse, especially if you're a few years in, then the people that survive are probably going to be the guys who are good shots. But the thing is, if you watch the shows, usually there's the guys who are good that are mowing down most of the zombies, and there's these guys in the center that are like, you guys take care of that, and I'm just going to try to push these guys off me until one of the good killer guys shows up. But on a show like Walking Dead, every motherfucker on that show, I'm waiting for Judith to fucking start stabbing people in the eye. I'm waiting for the baby to just fucking like have a knife in its mouth and go, and because everybody's headshots, everybody's stabbing everybody in the head. Nobody sucks at fighting zombies. They just introduced a Reverend character on the show who's from the comic books, and he's the only pussy, but he's still capable enough to run away and push people off.
The other dude, the dude who lied about being the savior guy.
Oh, Eugene.
Eugene's terrible too.
Yeah, Eugene's terrible too. But it's novel. It's novel now. We're 5 seasons into the show, and it's novel to have a couple of guys that suck at fighting zombies.
Right. But so the deal is though, and here's the problem with zombies: is the zombies themselves aren't particularly interesting after a while. So you got to make it more about the human element. You got to still have zombies in there to perpetuate the apocalypse. But that's why the most interesting conflicts on The Walking Dead are between the surviving groups of humans, and then you kind of have to have zombies around, right? So that's why I think once you get 5 seasons into it, it just gets more and more clear that zombies are cool, but zombies are cool for like a movie. When you're 5 seasons of hour-long episodes of zombies, after a while the zombies kind of just become stab real quick, stab real quick, stab real quick. Because it's got to be about, oh shit, they've met a really nice human. What is that guy up to? That's what it turns into, and that becomes a more compelling story. Zombies, as cool as they are, they can't keep the compelling story going because they are in essence just repetitive.
Well, that is actually one of the things that I like about the Walking Dead TV show versus the comics is every episode of The Walking Dead, for the most part, has at least one instance of here comes the zombies, and it gives you something you got to fight them off. It gives you that action beat or it gives you that horror beat. In the comics, you'll go for issues and issues without any fucking zombies showing up, and it's nothing but the human drama, and it's not always very compelling human drama, especially at the points that they're starting to adapt in the show now, which is cause for concern because in my opinion, they've run out of good material to adapt. Whoa. So either the showrunners are going to have to start, stepping up their game, or they're going to go downhill just like the comics have.
Whoa. I don't read comic books, so.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't intended to go to the zombies. I was actually trying to do something slightly different with this, but since I have a few zombie books, I'll talk about them real quick. Hold on.
Okay.
Just a couple of bad zombie books to discuss.
Is there any good ones?
Because I was hopeful, even though George Romero hasn't done, in my opinion, a good zombie movie since Dawn of the Dead in 78, 79, whatever it was. He decided he was going to do a sequel to his, what's he done? He's done Island of the Dead. He's done Diary of the Dead.
Never seen it.
Survival of the Dead.
Which one did we see with Dennis Hopper?
Land of the Dead.
Okay, yeah.
That was the one where his adaptation of his old script, Dead Reckoning.
Yeah.
Where it's like Mad Max meets the zombies.
I like that one.
And then he did his found footage movie, Diary of the Dead, which we also saw in the theater. Yeah, the rich kids in the trailer who were videotaping everything, and they end up going to the one rich kid's mansion, and that's where they have their big run-in with the zombies.
I think so. Vaguely
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah, so we saw that in the theater. I mean, Land of the Dead, I haven't bothered to watch since we saw it in the theater.
I own it.
I thought it was okay. I didn't like it very much. But then Diary of the Dead was just garbage. It was absolute fucking garbage.
Garbage, son.
And then I saw Survival of the Dead, which is the one where there's an island off the coast of New England where everybody still speaks with an Irish accent randomly and rides around on horses. Yeah. And that was the worst of. Well, I don't know. Diary of the Dead is so bad it's hard to decide whether or not Diary but it's worse than virtually anybody's zombie movies, much less Romero ones. But I figured maybe with the unlimited budget that comes with comics, and the fact that the premise is vampires versus zombies, and Romero hadn't done vampires since Marty back in the 70s, I thought maybe George A. Romero's Empire of the Dead, illustrated by Alex Maleev and published by Marvel Comics, might be worth a damn. And it was okay.
Really?
It was okay. It was
okay or okay?
It was okay. You know, like that long drawn out okay. It's about like there's a scientist. Because it's been a few months since I've read this. There's a scientist and there's a cop, and then this one cop girl who was zombified, but she still retained enough of her spirit to want to do good things and not want to like eat people. And then there are these vampires, and the vampires are quietly eating the survivors in the apocalypse because the setup of this book is identical to Land of the Dead, where the rich people have created their own little utopia. Well, not a utopia. It's they have a lot of the amenities that we still have today, but they're isolated. Like Manhattan Island, I believe, has been isolated, and they've been able to keep it relatively zombie-free. But the humans that are left are still being eaten by vampires.
But wasn't it proven in Land of the Dead, or was it Zombie? What was the other one? The Land one?
Land of the Dead, yeah.
Yeah, Land of the Dead, that zombies could walk through water?
Yeah, but they still have to have cops to drive off the zombies that managed to come up onto Manhattan Island.
I was going to say, that was his concept. I figured he'd have to stick to it.
And also they're doing the thing where they're doing gladiatorial combat between zombies for entertainment, which he just pretty much straight up stole from Walking Dead, I think, until that's Walking Dead stole from someplace else. It gets kind of hard to remember who stole from whom at this point. But it's okay. The art's pretty good, actually, for a zombie book. It's just that Romero doesn't have any interesting stories to tell anymore, and he's really retreated into genre. What I thought was great about Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead is that these were the original zombie stories, and they were stories about the characters and about the situation. And why I hated everything from Day of the Dead afterward is that it became about adapting the stories he wanted to tell into zombie stories, because those were the only kind of films he was going to be able to get financed. And this is more of that. He's still trying to play on the whole capitalism is evil, and the vampires are representing capitalism, and the zombies are representing the common man who are slowly elevating their intelligence so that they can recognize the threat amongst them and work together. And it's just, he's not very good at telling those types of stories, and it's very obvious what he's trying to do, and it's not entertaining. So I have no desire. I might read it. I believe that those books are on Marvel Unlimited, and when I have a slow day, I might go ahead and read through the other books on the app because I'm paying for it every month. But I would not buy another one of those trade paperbacks. I would not actively support the book.
I want to check it out.
Yeah, this one though.
You go fucker.
So you've got this company, Action Lab, where they were kind of doing more like family-friendly type books, sort of, kind of, or just more accessible books for wider audiences. And then they started doing these, what they call the Danger Zone, which was their mature readers books, where they were more, nasty. And because there was some positive vibe from Action Lab, I decided to give this book a try, even though it looked pretty cheesy. It's called Night of the 80s Undead. It's set in the 1980s in Hollywood. Basically, this contaminated cocaine infects all the movie stars and comedians and sports people from 80s movies and television, and they all go zombie and start killing each other. And it is absolutely dreadful. It is completely incompetent and gross and unappealing and stupid. And it was painful to read this. I had to force my way through it. The art's ugly. The characters are detestable. There's nobody here to root for. They committed the sin. The cover is an obvious swipe, say homage of Kevin Maguire's Justice League cover #1 from 1987. Everybody has swiped this so many times that it has. I didn't even notice it first because I've seen this cover so many times. It's almost like a generic cover. It's like if you did the Justice League / Fantastic Four #1 cover again, you almost don't even recognize it as being an homage because it's been done so many times. It's just a comic book cover, but it's just so ugly and so stupid, and it's got tits and it's got gore and it's got terrible written impersonations of 80s icons. They try to ape some elements from some of those movies, but it's a thin little book. It's only $8.99. It's 96 pages, and honestly, it looks like what they did is that they took unsold copies of the comic books and they just bound them together. If you look at the spine, you can see where the old spines used to be. They just glued them together with a new cardstock cover. And I understand why this book didn't sell that well, because it's fucking pitiful. And I'm sorry I bought it. I'm sorry I supported it. There are tits in there. I'm sorry I bought it. Huh?
Cross-referencing. Page numbers, please. Who produced this?
Is horrible.
People, human beings.
Oh, this is bad.
Yeah, and
this is right there with fucking prison pit.
Okay, yeah, you have to kind of clarify because like Dale Keown's Pit doesn't look anything like Dale Keown's Pit.
Well,
honestly, Prison Pit was better drawn than this book. It had more life to it and better storytelling. This is a book that's just bad. It's bad and it's in color, but it has no lifeblood in it. And what's worse is you read these editorials from the writer, and he's like, I just wanted to do the best kick-ass motherfucking book I could, and it's awesome, and you guys are going to fucking love it, and, Bon Jovi rule! I was like, shut the fuck up. You are a fucking moron. Your shit is detestable. You should see Max face as he's flipping through this book.
This shit is repugnant. Oh my god.
Yeah, I tell you, man, the artwork is horrible.
Yeah, this is way worse than Prison Pit, bro.
And it takes a hell of a lot longer to read, and that's not appreciated in this case. Because while I probably paid less for that book and got more time with the book, that wasn't quality time.
You're never getting that time back.
Nope, not getting back.
I'm trying to figure out what this reminds me of. This reminds me of like bad, well, I mean, it kind of is, like the cheesy softcore porn comics.
Yeah, it looks
90s. Like it looks exactly like this is probably that guy that drew all those.
It looks like somebody who did like a revolutionary comics rock and roll biography and was trying to draw like Phil Noto.
I don't get any of those references, and I hate to admit it. I wish I could BS. I got franked.
You got franked.
Fuck! I thought we were making a full podcast without getting franked.
Never happens.
Yeah.
So once again, it's been a little over a year since the last episode of The Underguide, and at least part of the culpability falls on my reading of Swords of Cerebus. The book is up to issue number 22 at this point. We're in the year 1980, and we're picking up from a cliffhanger with the death of Elrod. Cerebus is back in Bedoin. He's hanging out with the xenophobic Captain America Lift, Captain Cockroach, who has taken as his Bucky stand-in Elrod, the albino Kentucky Fried Wizard. Cerebus is suffering from a combination of intoxication and the hangover from the drugs given to him by the feminist cult, and the three of them find themselves in an alley while a very capable Red Clan assassin is bearing down on them. Cerebus has knocked himself out with a bolo, so he isn't there to save Elrod before he's killed by the Red Clan assassin. However, Elrod shows an ability not unlike Deadman from DC Comics to possess somebody else's body, and he takes over the Red Clan assassin. Back in the offices of President Weissenhoff of the United Feldwar State, Cerebus wakes up with the black eye and declares that he's going to team up with the Dagitans to raid Bedouin. What he isn't aware of of is that Palnu attacked on Concordance Eve by the Tigitans, the problem being that without the guidance of Cerebus, the Tigitans tried to attack and were easily routed and massacred. So suddenly Cerebus no longer has an army and no longer has a plan. While trying to work out his next step, Dead Albino entertains everyone and shows off his new power by possessing various people present in the room. It's Cerebus who realizes the incredible power Dead Albino represents, that they can essentially use his power possession to quietly create a coup by betraying people, having people turn themselves in as traitors, and basically wiping out the various members of the government that would get between Hauptmann and control of Bedouin. Unfortunately for them, while trying to enact this plan, Dead Albino loses his ability and is revived as Elrod. Hauptmann is hunted for his treason, and Cerebus uses his small size to wiggle through some bars and leave Hauptmann to his own devices. Then we move on to issue 23. Unfortunately for Cerebus, he manages to cut himself on a wagon wheel nail on his way out of town. An infection set in, and in the midst of a snowstorm, he's caught out in the wilderness, bleeding, nearly on the verge of death. Taking a page from the 1970s Clint Eastwood movie The Beguiled, which was recently remade by Sofia Coppola, a group of isolated women in the midst of a civil war take in the aardvark. They nurse him back to health, but everyone has to contend with warring factions making their way to this isolated house, and with the desires of this group of women, none of which are of great interest to Cerebus. Unlike the protagonist in The Beguiled, Cerebus has no interest in indulging in any peccadillos at the house, and instead at one point has to be dressed up as a woman to disguise himself from an enemy guard, who unfortunately recognizes him as, an aardvark in a wig. However, the ladies of the house are well versed in crossbows, and Cerebus lives to convalesce. The funny thing about the parodic format of Cerebus is that you think it's going to play out like a Mad Magazine take on a book or TV show, movie, what have you, and be fairly true to the material and just mock it throughout. That's not how Cerebus works. You've got that setup of The Beguiled, and so you assume it's going to play out the same way, and then partway through it turns out that the madame of the school is actually a man who is a sorcerer who had tried to form multiple schools using boys in order to harness their life energy to create an apocalypse beast, before realizing that he was better off with girls, they would be more obedient, in no way informing Dave Sim's later views. And so this sorcerer, Charles X. Claremont, and aside from the school, nothing to do with the X-Men, probably has more to do with his time writing Doctor Strange, he successfully creates this apocalypse beast, a woman thing, largely indistinguishable from Marvel's Man-Thing, aside from the massive breasts, which are in shadow throughout the appearances. We carry on to the last issue, This Woman, This Thing, where Claremont explains that he's basically created this apocalypse beast in order to kill all the people that made him feel bad. Very much a retread of the sorcerers we've seen in previous Cerebus stories. So once again, Sim adds a twist to it. They cap it upon a castle with an art dealer and artist whose milieu is breasts. He sees breasts as a universal allegory for whatever you would need them to be, and of course they sell extremely well. The artist is very dense, and he's about to be killed by the woman thing when the sorcerer realizes that this fellow has happened to come into possession of the very first ever apocalypse beast, and he manages to use his magical powers to revive this creature, the Sump Thing, which not only looks like a Bernie Wrightson's Swamp Thing, but specifically Kelly Jones's. It makes me wonder, because of the extremely exaggerated musculature, if perhaps Dave Sim was an influence on Kelly Jones's signature style. So the Sump Thing is revived, and it first attacks the woman thing, and over the course of the battle, Claremont is killed. The pair fall into a pit, and ultimately something and a woman thing do what one would expect from creatures of opposing genders. Because the artist feels guilty about how things turned out, Cerebus ends up soaking him for as much gold as he can get his hands on, and that's the end of the volume. The art is getting better and better as the story progresses. The stories themselves still are very much in that Bronze Age mold. I know the book's going to get more involved. It's going to create more of its own lore. But so far, because I'm just finding a few years into the run, the book's still kind of tedious, and it's really slowing up our progress on getting underguides out, because literally I'll start to think about putting out underguides, and then I think, oh wait, I've got to catch up on reading the Cerebus. It is interfering with the progression of this podcast, so I'm not sure where we go from here. I finally finished the first telephone book. It's a very intimidating proposition to move on to a second telephone book. Dave Sim remains a controversial figure. There's already been new controversies in terms of how he addresses LGBTQ culture and his satirical series of combinations of medieval drawings and old Cerebus clip art that caused the fervor earlier this year. Maybe I jumped to another series. I'm not sure. Hey, the first book's down at least. I've still got 2 more books on my shelf. They're still wrapped in plastic. If I decide to pop them open, you'll find out on a later episode of the Underguide. making the trek with us on our last guided tour through James P. Starlin's Metamorphosis Odyssey, 108 Sage, Alley Bats, Dr. Ange, Bob Buster, Bone Dragon Comics, Brian Mulvey, Cerebus Film, Chris at Bad Books for Beginners, Comic Crazy, spelled with a Z, Darth Baker, Dave's Comic Heroes Blog, Debache, Dr. G Nerdologist, Dirk Ashton, Ed Moore at Indie Comics Fan and Teal Productions, The Electric Strawberry, Fanholes Podcast, today's special guest Firestorm Fan, History of Comics on Film, Jack's Web of Chaos, Jeffrey Brown, Justice First Dawn, Keith G. Baker, Cal Benning Likes Comics, Odell Abner Dracula, Professor Frenzy, Rad Adventures, Randy Caldwell, Richard Field, Richard G., Secret Wars and Beyond Podcast, Sean McLaughlin, Siskoid, Steve Sellers, Terry Mayo, Tony Wolf, Warlord Worlds, Wicked Righteous Comic, and Zach Sally. Kyle Benning also wrote, really enjoyed this episode. Dreadstar's a blind spot for me. Always wanted to jump in, but with many different volumes of collections out there, which appear to have different levels of quality, not sure what to jump in with for getting best reprint quality and the complete epic. Worth noting, Jim Starlin and Ominous Press have been crowdfunding a new collection of the entire run of the series, initially targeting just the material written by Jim Starlin, with the option of potentially doing the Peter Davis stuff later on. So this is going to be in 3 hardcover, high-quality, shot from the original artwork reproductions. They're going to come in a slipcase, and there's various levels of support you can give to the project. So if you really want the whole shebang, that may be the best way to go. Otherwise, the Dynamite Entertainment reprints were also pretty darn good.
The Underguise is a Rolled Spine podcast. All references to copyrighted works and audio clips employed are believed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended against their copyright holders. The views expressed in this podcast are assumed legitimate, truthful, and solely possessed by the speaker.